Let's talk about Unit 1, Part 2. So we had finished up our Unit 1, Part 1 discussion by discussing sociological imagination, and then we had also discussed some of the sociological forefathers, some of those original sociologists who had come up. The next topics that I want to talk to you about is a very, very important one that we're going to be circling back to throughout our entire time together this whole semester, which is the 3 theoretical perspectives. So let's get started. To begin with, let's answer the question, what is a theoretical perspective? So a theoretical perspective is a set of assumptions about an area of study, specifically how society works. That's the one that we're going to be focusing on because this is a sociology class. They're viewed as true by supporters and help to organize research. So what you're going to have is you're going to have this whole collection of assumptions, and you're going to see them as being true, as convinced. You're going to be convinced, and you're going to try to convince others. This will all make more sense once we actually nail down what these perspectives are. Each of the 3 different theoretical perspectives put a different slant on the human social behavior. So what we're going to do is we're going to have kind of 3 different viewpoints, 3 different ways to look at any given situation. The use of all 3 at the same time lets us see the most important dimensions of the human social behavior. So if you try to commit yourself to one of these 3 things that I present you with, and you say, yes, that's the one for me, and you ignore the other 2, you will be doing a disservice to yourself. You won't be able to apprehend or comprehend as much or see as much as those who may embrace all 3. So let's start off with our first one. Our first one that we have is functionalism. Our second one is conflict theory, and our third one is symbolic interactionalism. So functionalism. Functionalism is almost scientific in a way. The major idea for functionalism is that society is an integrated whole. And the reason I say that this one is the most scientific is because when I think about functionalism, I think about a cell. Do you know that diagram of a cell that you get in your science class where there's the nucleus with the DNA and the RNA, and then there's the ribosomes and all the chloroplasts and all the different parts of the cell, and they're all working together to make sure that that cell is functioning. Same kind of thing with the human body. Inside your human body, you have your stomach, you have your lungs, you have your heart, you have your pancreas, you have your liver, you have your kidneys, and they're all working together to make sure that that human body survives and functions properly. And that's the same kind of thing with functionalism. Instead of it being a cell or a human body, it is a whole society. So there are garbage men, and there are lawyers, and there are politicians, and there are school teachers, and there are food delivery drivers, and they're all working together as an integrated whole to make that society work and survive. Next, conflict theory. Conflict theory looks at the conflicts that exist within a society. And most of the time, those conflicts are over some big subjects, which almost seem so big that they might not have solutions. So these are ideas like the conflict between race or class or gender. And so these are going to create some epic struggles that will last a long time. And it is important that we try our very best to strive towards to fixing them and making them better. But the conflict theory really revolves around those things. Lastly, symbolic interactionalism. Symbolic interactionism is how group members use shared symbols as they interact. This one is a little bit different. If you're familiar with the concept of like a metaphor or a simile in an English class, this is going to be kind of like that. This one's an interesting one. So now one of the things that I noticed right off the bat when I was first learning about these is some of them, like functionalism and symbolic interactionalism, in my opinion, it seems like they are more viewing how society is working, and conflict theory almost seems like it is focused on the way that the society is failing. And so that's an interesting thing. We have some, it almost seem like they're a little bit more positive, and then you have some that are almost a little bit more negative. But what you'll see as you dive deeply is they all are going to have that positive viewpoint and that negative viewpoint, and that is why we want to make sure that we are paying close attention to all of them and not just sticking to just one. All right, functionalism. Functionalism is our first one, and it emphasizes the contributions or functions of each part. As I was talking about, there's different members that are groups in society, and they're all going to be working, and hopefully that work is going to be harmonious. Here are some big ideas. The family It is important that in a society that we have families, and they are going to provide a number of different things. But to kind of boil it down, you need a family for reproduction and for care. You need to take care of your offspring. You need to take care of the older generation. You need to take care of each other. So that's something that family does. Economy. Economy is going to be a very, very big part of society, and it's going to cover some smaller groups as well. Economy is going to help out with production and distribution of goods, as well as food and other things that a society is going to need, and consumption. So those are all kinds of things that are going to fall under economy, and that's going to be one of the major functions in the society. And lastly, religion. Religion is a very, very big one. That's beliefs and practices, and those are the kinds of things that people need in order to comfort them and to feel like they have a good path in life so that they can move forward confidently and know that what they're doing is right and just and righteous. How does functionalism explain social change? Well, society is once again considered a whole. So a change in one part is going to result in the change in the whole society. Excuse me. A major change in economy may change the family. So in general, the industrialization that we had talked about in our last PowerPoint presentation and lesson, it also had other effects as well, other than bringing on the rise of sociology. It also meant that there was less children that were being born. There are other ways that these changes can occur as well. Women are entering, and when women entered the workforce, that changed the way that the society worked in a number of different ways as well. And right now, it seems that we are experiencing some changes that are happening as well with some of the different movements that are happening in the news on a daily basis. That is going to have far-reaching effects that are stretched far beyond the streets where those protests are taking place. Next, conflict theory. I'll let you in on a little secret. Conflict theory is close to my heart. This is probably my primary sociological perspective. This is the one that I spend the most time thinking about, but I always make sure that I return to the other two as well. For this one, it focuses on the structures such as class relations or race relations or gender relations or any of the other structures, structures such as education or the economy again. And what we're looking for in this is we're focusing on the conflicts as well. Conflict theory is going to show how major patterns of inequality produce stability in our circumstances and change in others. So we are really looking at inequality. Inequality means that things are not even, that they are not equal in all ways. The society might be functioning harmoniously, but the people who live inside it might not have the same opportunities or the same level of wealth. And so that is going to cause friction and possibly negative problems. So those are things that you focus on when you're looking at conflict theory. What is conflict? Conflict is, once again, friction, as I was talking about. Stress. Stress is how members of a privileged group try to maintain advantage while the subordinate groups struggle to increase their own advantages. So in any society, there are going to be members of that society that are going to have things that others do not, and then there will be other groups in that society that do not have, and there is going to be a huge amount of friction that is going to occur between those. And that friction can come out as just simple frustration, or it can turn into demonstrations or violence and rioting. Lots of different things can show up. With conflict, that is always going to lead to suggestions that eliminate privilege will lower the level of conflict. So this is a little bit of an interesting thing. If you bring down someone's privilege so that things are a little bit more equal, then what that will do is that will level out the conflict, and that will cause things to work a little bit more evenly. That's a hard thing to do, though, because those people who have privilege are usually very rarely interested in letting go of it. How does conflict perspective explain social change? So as the balance of power shifts between the different groups of society, results in societal change. So once again, as we are making those changes, as we are changing the amount of privilege that certain groups have, whether that be an increase or a decrease, that is how the societal changes are going to occur. In our little graphic right over here, we see the women, two different women who are working in two very different ways in two different kinds of generations. The women's movement is an attempt to change the power between men and women. Long ago, it was very clear that men saw themselves as the dominant sex, and they worked hard to maintain their privilege by trying to suppress vote and property ownership and acceptance into schools. But the women's movement has made many gains, and there are still gains to be made that are going to change the way that women are viewed and interacted with in our society. Gender roles are changing as well. Women are choosing to work more. Men are helping around the house. So once again, when women change, when they are given more opportunities for work and stuff like that, what's going to happen is that then things are going to change for men as well. So it's not just simply that women just take on more, they do everything they used to do and they do more. It's that that is going to create a more societal change that is going to affect not just women but men as well. All right, last one. Symbolic interactionalism. Symbolic interactionalism is another one favorite of mine. This is probably my second favorite one. Function on interpersonal communication, or focus on interpersonal communication in social settings. So what we're doing is we're talking about the way that we are going to be interacting with each other. Communication for a lot of people is what they're thinking about as verbal communication, but it can show up in a lot of different ways. Nonverbal communication, cues, all kinds of different kinds of things that can show up. Emphasis on social life as possible only because people attach meaning to things. So in our society, there are certain things that you can have or maybe don't have that are going to hold a symbolic meaning right off the bat. If you have an expensive or designer slide-on sandals or a purse or some shoes that have some red bottoms on them, then that is going to mean something. It's not just that the shoe is cool or the sandal is comfortable or the bag holds all the things you need it to hold. It is that symbol of I live an affluent life and I can afford some very fine things. So these are a lot. There are lots of different symbols that exist in our society, and we are going to look at a couple of them. The symbolic interactionalism also stresses the notion that people create their social circumstances and do not merely react to them. So a lot of times what we're doing right here is we're thinking about the fact that people, especially teens, but people in general, are going to portray themselves in a particular way. They're going to view themselves in a particular way, and they're going to strive to have others view themselves in that way as well. They're going to create circumstances for themselves, and they're going to try to make sure that they're fitting in, that they're liked, that their social media accounts get the gratification that they need them to have. All right, let's get a little bit more literal, I should say. What is the significance of symbols in a symbolic interactionalism? So let's talk about some very basic symbols right here that's going to help you out. So a symbol is anything that stands for something else. So earlier I was talking about some designer clothing, but let's talk a little bit more specific than that. A flag. Right here we have a picture of the flag for the United States of America. This flag is it's red, it's white, it's blue. It's very beautiful to look at. It's got a very nice design on it, but it stands for a lot of different things. When some people see that flag, what they see is the embodiment of freedom. It is the embodiment of their individuality and all of the choices that they get to make. And that also means that all of the choices that other people do not get to make for them. Other people, when they see that flag, what they see is the United States military. Military people, as well as police officers and firefighters and other organizations like that, proudly wear that flag on their arm, on their back, on their chest, and display it because they see themselves as a figurehead or a leader in this country right here in the United States of America. And so that flag stands for strength and freedom and independence for them as well. So this flag can have a lot of different meanings. Let's get even more basic than that. The second picture that we have here is a picture of a traffic light. And when you are looking at a traffic light, there is no directions on that traffic light, and so you need to know exactly what those light colors mean. When you see a red light, the meaning of that symbol is that you need to stop your car. And when you see a green light, the meaning of that symbol is that you get to drive your car and you get to hit the gas. And the meaning of the yellow light is slow down and stop if you can. So now if we have a symbol or an idea like the yellow light, and it is not well understood by all people who are using it, that is when some real problems are going to come into play. Basic assumptions of symbolic interactionism. So our first assumption right here is going to be that we learn the meaning of symbols the way we see others reacting to them. So if you are looking at this traffic light and you're sitting in the passenger seat and your dad sees the yellow light show up and he floors it to drive right through the middle of the intersection, then that is going to be something that you're going to learn. And so the next time that you see a yellow light, you're going to think in your mind, well, this is my opportunity to floor it. I need to drive as fast as I can. Second assumption, once we learn the meaning of a symbol, we base our behaviors on them. So once again, once you learn that from your father that you are going to need to hit the gas when you see a yellow light, that is what you are going to do. Third assumption, we use the meanings of symbols to imagine how others will respond to our behavior. So if you view your father in a positive light and you think, wow, my dad is so great and wonderful, if I floor it through these traffic lights, then other people will see me in the same kind of way. Or if you see your father getting speeding tickets all the time and interacting with the police all the time, maybe what you'll do is you'll think to yourself, when I floor it and I go through these lights, I'm going to get speeding tickets and I'm going to get pulled over by the police all the time as well. Lastly, at the very bottom right there, teenagers sometimes act in a certain way in order to attract someone they like. So this is definitely something that we do all the time. You may change the way that you are interacting or the way that you're behaving in order to get yourself that fresh start that you want, so you can interact with different groups of people and get some different kinds of attention. And so what we're going to do is we're going to follow those people that we are interested in. We're going to follow and see what they do. We are going to try to tease out the things that they see as positive, and then we are going to try to act in that same kind of way. We're going to be looking for those symbols, and we're going to be following those symbols. You know, symbols like varsity sports or student politics, or going to dances, having nice cars, or having nice clothing, those kinds of things. Which perspective is better? So for our last slide right here, I'd like to swing back to our very first slide and talk about this. There is not a perspective that is perfect. So we have functionalism, we have conflict theory, and we have symbolic. And it is important that we visit all three of them consistently, that we're constantly cycling through all three of them. When you are introduced to a new and unique situation, it's important to try to think about it in as many of these ways as possible so you can get the deepest information you can from them. There will be certain situations where one is stronger than the other two. There will be certain situations where they are equally strong. It is still always important that we work our way through each of them just to make sure that we can get as much information as possible so we can understand as clearly and deeply as possible. Last slide right here is going to be our last little wrap up, and this one has to do with something that I had mentioned in our first slide. In our first slide, I had mentioned that in sociology, it is the social science where the most words are kind of invented, and this one is kind of similar to that. The U.S. dominates sociology. We have lots of sociological studies going on and findings that are being published all the time. Even though those forefathers that we had talked about, many of them came from our European countries, it is the U.S. that now dominates sociology. We are just fascinated and intrigued by our own society, and we are constantly studying it, which is interesting. I think that level of creativity and entrepreneurship and individualism that is kind of just inherent in U.S. society has a lot to do with the fact that the U.S. dominates sociology, and it also is related to the fact that so many words are invented in it. So that is a unique and interesting thing. And it means that the things that we're going to talk about and study in this class are going to even be easier to connect to your own life because you are probably a U.S. citizen. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you in class.